Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Club. This week's Race C unfortunately is not quite worth doing, so we're going to focus on Race B. The meta isn't quite as clear, but I still have a good alternative for you. Let's get into it. To be very honest with you, the Group 3 class is actually pretty well balanced right now, but it does appear that the GTR is the meta car. There are actually a lot of different cars that would work as anti-meta cars, so I just chose the AMG because I like it, and I actually got a couple wins from the back with it today. When you first look at the leaderboard, you're probably going to notice there are actually a lot of different cars on the top 10 and of course in the top 100, but if you take a closer look, you might notice that the GTR Nismo occupies 30% of all of the entries in the top 100. I managed to put the AMG in 18th place, and there's also an AMG in 3rd place, which makes it of course very strong, but like I said, there's not a clear meta, so this is just a good alternative. I don't actually know where the original tune came from, but I ended up changing the anti-roll bars to 6.6 from 5.5. If this is your tune, feel free to let me know and I'll give you credit, but it might just be a random tune. Either way, make sure you set it up each time before each race. As you start your lap, I want you to keep in mind that right at the braking zone, the track kind of curves to the right, so you're going to have to adjust for that, because if you just stay aligned all the way on the left, you're going to go all the way off into the grass. Speaking of grass, before the 100-meter board, right at the beginning of the grass, you want to hit the brakes. Get down to 2nd gear, and I'd say about a full car length after the 50-meter board is when you want to start turning in, continuing to trail brake all the way to the apex. You might want to avoid getting too close to the apex, because as you can see, there's a bit of a bump right there, and it can upset the balance of your car like it did with me. I was able to catch it, but it can also slow you down, so be careful. Continue steering to the right until you get to about the end of this curb here on the left. You'll notice I start turning in before the end of it, but I lift off right at the end of the curb. After lifting off, you want to let it coast and continue to decelerate so you can get all the way up on the curb. You'll notice the track elevation changes just slightly right past this apex right here, and it can upset the balance of the car if you're not gentle on the throttle. Of course, you want to steer yourself all the way to the outside, using as much of the exit curb as you can to get a wide run into the next corner. About 2 red segments of the curbing before the end of the green on the right is when you want to hit the brakes. Immediately downshift to 2nd gear and start trail braking in. Get all the way down to 1st as well, and I like to put my right tires on the curb right here. Some people avoid putting their left tires all the way up on the curb because it can make you slide, but as long as you're gentle on the throttle, you should be fine. After coming off the first curb, I like to get on the throttle and sneak in as much full throttle as possible until my car is facing that roller coaster in the distance. From here, we change direction, turn in, and only lift after we turn in to make sure that we can get as much of the car up on the curb as possible, squeezing more throttle out, going all the way past this green part, and then trying to avoid the grass here on exit. It's really sketchy, but that is the line, unfortunately, and you need to do it if you want to be fast. Align yourself to the right and start looking for the cones. At the final cone is when you're going to hit the brakes. In 3rd gear, trail brake immediately. You're going to see where there's missing grass and exposed dirt just beyond the curb. That's where all the cars are hitting, and that's when you want to go up on the curb. Continue steering to the left, and you want to be to the left of the center before you set up for the next corner. The final red segment of the curb on the left is where I like to hit the brakes. Avoiding full brake, I immediately go down to 2nd gear and try to get the car to the right as soon as possible. Coming all the way up on this curb is the best practice. You want to make sure you tighten that curb as much as you can so you can get on the throttle as early as possible. Of course, avoiding going all the way into the sand because that will destroy your lap. Thanks to my friend SW, I really like to use a double apex approach to this corner. Aim to put your left tires up on this outside part of the track right here. Once both of those tires are off the grass, then we're going to aim for the inside and start braking in a straight line. I want you to brake at 100%, and when you hit the first apex, you're going to downshift to 1st, start trail braking in, and then gently get back on that throttle in 2nd gear. I missed the 2nd apex, but I encourage you to have a little bit more patience than I did and hit that apex because you should be able to get on full throttle earlier than I did. Come off this curb, cross the track, and end up on the next curb to prepare yourself for the Schumacher S. To know when to turn in, look for these tire marks right here. As I turn in, I'm going to lift maybe 5 to 10% off the throttle just to make sure I don't bounce too much. And you'll notice I lift just a little bit when I come close to this curb too. It felt like I was going to get some understeer and go off in the sand, and it's definitely better safe than sorry. Make sure you turn as little as possible, but early enough that you don't go off in the sand in the exit either. For the next corner, I actually lost a lot of time, so I'm going to try to help you not make the same mistake I did. This large chunk of concrete that goes all the way to the barrier, you want to brake right about the middle of it. I braked a little past, so that also meant that I missed the apex. You should go all the way up on this curb right here, but instead I just barely touched the curb. Staying in 3rd gear, gently apply the throttle to continue tracking out, but continue steering to the left as well. I like to use the end of this curb here on the right. When the nose of my car gets all the way past it, that is when I switch directions. Turn to transfer the weight first and then lift off the throttle. Add just a little bit of brake to make sure you can come all the way up on this curb here and then gently get back on the throttle as early as you possibly can. If you carry too much speed, you can go into the sand pretty easily, so be very careful and you might need to try it just a few times to get it right. I say that as if it's not the entire process for every kind of track and car combination. Approaching the final chicane, of course, you want to look for the meter boards, and we're going to look for the 100 meter board to know when we want to hit the brakes. Make sure you brake in a perfectly straight line, get down to second gear, and right after the 50 meter board, you're going to start turning in. Keeping in mind you only need 2 tires on the track at any given time, I want you to make sure that you're using as much of this curb as you possibly can. You'll also notice that I'm adding a little bit of throttle. If you allow the car to continue decelerating as you go over the bumps, the weight's going to be over the nose of the car, and if you're turned at all, it's going to make the car just follow where the front tires are, so a little bit of throttle can actually keep it balanced. Move yourself all the way up on the curb on the outside of the track right here, and then keep your eye out for this cone here on the inside. About 1 car length before that, we're going to hit the brakes. Get to second and immediately start trail braking in. I like to apex just after the start of the barrier right here on the right. Carefully add the throttle as you continue steering beyond the apex. You want to make sure that you use as much of this runoff as possible, but of course you don't want to touch the sand at all because it would be a big shame if you ruin your lap at the very end. From here, it's a straight shot to the finish. Like I said in the breakdown, it's really important to note that how you're aligned with the track right here is going to be different than the shape of the track once you hit the brakes, so you've got to adjust for that as you approach the first corner. It is possible to go over this bump, as you can see, without sliding out, but it did cost me a little bit of time because I did have to make a correction before I got fully on the throttle and started accelerating out. There is a bit of elevation change as you hit this left-hander before the chicane, so be very careful on that. And on the chicane, I want you to use as much of the curb as you can, especially this outside portion. It is a ridiculous line that you have to take, but you do have to take it because your opponents will be as well. For this next left-right combination, neither of those corners you're really going to go full brake on. If you go full brake, you're probably going to understeer because you should be turning through most of the braking zone, so just be very careful about your brake pressure. I think most people probably take this corner, this hairpin, as a single late apex, but like I said before, my buddy SW taught me how to do it as a double apex. He does it much better than I do, but it's actually the only way that I can do it consistently. I cannot actually do that corner with a single late apex. It is definitely possible to do this Schumacher S with full throttle, but I find it pretty tricky, and I don't lose a lot of time with just a very slight lift. Just don't lift too much. Like I mentioned, I braked late, so I missed the apex, and that made it so I got on the throttle late too. I would imagine that I lost more than a tenth, maybe even 2 tenths there. Probably just 1, but maybe even 2. Don't be tempted to take this corner like a traditional corner. You don't need to hit the apex and then track all the way out. You can just continue steering and align yourself for the next corner immediately. For the final chicane, I want you to be very aggressive. You got to go pretty much straight over it. You want to obliterate this cone and definitely use a little bit of throttle to balance the car. Braking off this curb can be tricky. You can give yourself some understeer, but if you're really gentle on the brakes, and of course, if you practice it like anything else, you should be able to use the curb and not understeer turning into that corner. Now, in this race, since it's a race B, we don't really have to worry about tire wear or fuel usage, and we don't have to worry about a pit stop either. Don't be fooled though, because that does not mean there isn't any strategy. A lot of racing strategy is just how you place your car for overtakes and defense. There's also strategy in how you race against specific cars. Some cars are going to be better at braking, some cars are going to be better at accelerating, some cars are going to have more top speed, some will have less, so knowing the capabilities of the specific cars you're racing is also important. Taking it even deeper than that, you could get to know all the people that you're racing. Knowing how people attack, defend, or just drive in general can really help you when it comes to trying to overtake them or defend against them. I could imagine a lot of you probably play at the same times throughout the day, and of course you're being matched up with people of your similar skill level, so you probably get used to racing against some of the people. I know some of you have enemies and some of you have friends on track. I encourage you to make as many friends as you possibly can, and I also very much encourage you to just take note of everyone's behaviors. Anyways, back to the race itself. There are some very specific parts of the track and parts of the race where you need to be extra careful. T1 at Nürburgring is pretty much as dangerous as T1 at Monza, but it doesn't quite get the same recognition. T3 here on lap 1 is usually going to be backed up. A lot of people are going to try to take the fast line, and if a lot of people are in the fast line, it's no longer the fast line. So if you bet on yourself and try to make an outside pass there, knowing you're going to have the inside line on the next corner, then you can oftentimes find some positions right at the very beginning of the race. It didn't happen this time, but a lot of times there are many people trying to take the tight line on this corner as well. which can cause people to back up, and it can cause people to cause an accident really easily. You can see a lot of people get stacked up, and the accordion effect makes it so people don't understand how early they have to brake. Now, I always go for the inside here, but I try to make sure that I brake early enough that if someone does move in front of me, I don't run into them. It can be a sacrifice of your time and your pace, but it's more important to not ruin anyone else's race or your own by being too aggressive there, especially at the beginning. The S's that we just went through can be really difficult, especially if you're very close to cars in front, because they will be providing dirty air and your front aero is not going to work nearly as well as it would in time trial. This move that I just pulled off on swoop is one of my favorites, but it can be really dangerous, especially if you're racing against someone who doesn't pay a lot of attention to their mirrors. A lot of people, even if you appear next to them in their peripheral vision, are still going to turn into you because a lot of people just don't know how to adjust to something surprising like that, and I don't think anyone's really prepared for someone to pass right there. Nothing really happened until the beginning of the next lap, but what was really interesting is there were some netcode issues. There was some lag, and so they made a little bit of contact, which then seemed to multiply and kind of get delayed with Murillo right there, so that gave me a position. Bruno had left the door completely open and did so again, kind of missing the braking point, so I tried to dive in, and he made a little bit of contact with me. It wasn't bad, though. It didn't take either of us off our lines. He went really wide there on the left-hander, which kind of messed up his exit, and I was able to get right on the outside of the next corner. Now, that is the meta car, so I was really curious how this was going to be able to perform against it, and I also didn't know if he was going to be mad about that contact, so I braked really late, kind of got some oversteer to ensure that if he took a normal line, he wouldn't hit me, and it worked out perfectly. I wasn't able to catch up to the next pack until the beginning of the next lap again, and I had a nice little battle with a kid named Frank right here. This guy's always clean with me, I appreciate him. Seeing that he was going to take a defensive line, that meant it was going to be really difficult for him to keep up his speed and also stay tight, so I took a wide line, snuck on the inside, and continued the attack going into this left-hander. He kindly gave me space, so I was able to pass on the outside, but he did a really good job of the defense. With just a little bit more aggressiveness from him, he could have actually held me off and probably had a better position going into this, but either way, I appreciated the battle. I mentioned how car knowledge is really important, and even though this little bit of car knowledge didn't actually help me at all in this race, I want to give you an example of what I mean. I know that the Porsche can turn in really well and is also extremely stable on corner exits. On top of that, it has such good grip and good acceleration that if you're fighting against a Porsche, you might find that they can take a tighter line, take an inside line, and still out-accelerate you even if you have a wider line. Like I said, that didn't really matter, but what does matter here is you might have noticed I almost went off the track there despite lifting off a lot more than I usually do. Make sure you don't try to stay full throttle in the Schumacher S if you're following people. Dirty air can also make it so it's really easy for you to drive all the way off the track here, so make sure you really stay patient when you're getting on the throttle. An underrated passing opportunity is the chicane. The best possible way to do it is staying on the inside. So what I like to do is pretend like I'm not going for a pass right there, and then I move at the last second. The Skittles driver tried to squeeze me, which is kind of, it's a good idea. It's never really a bad idea to defend if you really think you can maintain your position. But squeezing there is going to make it much, much slower for both drivers. And if there's any chance that there's a third party, another driver that could make a pass, you do not want to try to squeeze someone for defense there. It's actually much better just to let them go, try to get through the chicane faster than them, and then you can attack again after that. It's not always best to try to defend on every single corner. Now, since it's such a short race, that's pretty much all of it, but I did want to show you this because it's one of the stupidest things I've ever done. These are the dangers of reading chat as you're approaching a braking marker. I did not see exactly where I wanted to brake, and I wasn't paying enough attention, so I braked, or attempted to brake, much, much later. If you ever make a mistake like that, the best thing you can do is just throw yourself off the track and try to avoid hitting anyone else. Earlier on in another race, someone braked really late, but instead of trying to drive off the track, they drove towards the corner anyways and hit me extremely hard. So if you do make a mistake like that, which can happen because it's a video game and I don't expect you to concentrate like it's real life, just try to throw yourself off the track in a way that won't hurt anyone else. And now you've seen the stupidest thing I've ever done. I hope you guys enjoy the race. I'm really enjoying it. There's only about 7 minutes between races. If you're in a lower split, it might be even less time, which is good because I like racing more than I like waiting. As always, thank you very much for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'm going to leave you with a look at all of my members. I'm grinning right now. You might be able to tell because I realized that I've record the exact same outro every single time, and I could probably just reuse it, but I'm here recording it every time and making lots of mistakes and doing lots of takes. So consider this a blooper. I love all of you.